Part 1, The Weight of Silence. The rain had a way of softening everything in Seattle. Buildings blurred into hazy silhouettes, headlights stretched into thin streams of gold, and sidewalks reflected the world above like broken mirrors. I always thought there was something comforting about that. The rain concealed imperfections. It made the city look gentle, even when life inside it was anything but. My name is Daniel Miller. I'm 34 years old, and I've lived in this city for most of my adult life. By trade, I'm an architect, a profession that demands patience, precision, and the ability to see beyond what exists into what could be. For years, I applied those same skills to my marriage, believing that if you laid a strong enough foundation, the structure would hold no matter how many storms passed over it. Her name was Emily. She was 29 when everything began to shift, though in truth, the first cracks probably formed long before either of us noticed. Emily was a graphic designer, with an eye for colors and symmetry that I could never quite grasp. Where I saw hard lines and measured spaces, she saw emotion in shapes, life in hues. She had this light in her that people gravitated toward, a warmth that made you feel seen. When I first met her at a friend's gallery opening, I remember thinking how effortlessly she smiled. Not the kind of smile people wear to be polite, but one that seemed to rise out of her chest like it had been waiting to be shared. I thought, this is someone who could make even the darkest room feel alive. And for a while, she did. Our early years were filled with long walks through Capitol Hill, Sunday mornings in quiet cafes, and nights falling asleep to the sound of rain against the windows of our apartment. We weren't perfect, no one is, but we were close enough. Or at least, that's what I believed. The day-to-day rhythm of our lives was ordinary, and I loved it for that. I'd leave early for work, catching the bus downtown while Emily stayed behind, working from home. She liked to set up her desk by the window so she could watch the city move beneath her. When I'd come home, she'd often be curled up on the couch with her laptop balanced on her knees, surrounded by empty mugs of tea she never remembered to put in the sink. We had rituals. Tuesday nights were for takeout and old movies. Saturday mornings, we'd go to Pike Place Market, weaving through tourists to pick up fresh bread, flowers, maybe a bottle of wine. She always lingered at the flower stalls, touching petals with the reverence of someone handling memories. She said flowers were like conversations, fleeting, but worth cherishing while they lasted. It's strange, looking back. So many of those moments felt eternal at the time. Like nothing could shake them. But even the strongest walls, if left unattended, can hide fractures beneath the surface. The first shift was subtle. I came home one Thursday evening later than usual. A project deadline had kept me at the office past 9, and by the time I unlocked our apartment door, I was tired enough that I just wanted silence. The lights in the living room were dim, and Emily was on the couch, phone in hand. She startled slightly when I walked in. Just a small flinch, the kind you might miss if you weren't paying attention. But I did notice. She quickly put the phone face down on the coffee table, smiling as though nothing had happened. "You're home late," she said, rising to kiss me on the cheek. Her lips were warm, familiar, but there was a tightness around her eyes I couldn't place. "Yeah. The Madison project's eating me alive. How was your day?" "Busy," she replied quickly. Too quickly. Had a call with a new client. Spent most of the afternoon sketching concepts. You know, the usual. The conversation flowed on, ordinary on the surface. We ate leftovers, talked about the weather, about a movie we wanted to see that weekend. But the image of her startled expression lingered with me, tucked somewhere behind the words we exchanged. I didn't ask about the phone. At the time, it felt too small, too insignificant. After all, Emily and I trusted each other. At least, that's what I told myself. In the weeks that followed, there were other little things. She started going out more often in the evenings, saying she needed a change of scenery, to work, heading to cafes or co-working spaces she hadn't mentioned before. Sometimes she'd come back with a restless energy, pacing as though her thoughts were racing too fast for her body to contain. Her phone habits changed, too. She used to leave it lying around, on the kitchen counter, the coffee table, the nightstand, without a second thought. Now, it seemed glued to her hand. Even when she wasn't using it, it was close by, screen face down. Notifications silenced. When I reached for it once to check the time, she snatched it back almost instantly, laughing nervously. "Sorry, just had some work stuff open." Again, I told myself not to overthink it. People go through phases. She was probably stressed with work, maybe needing more privacy to keep her professional life separate from ours. But somewhere deep inside me, a quiet unease had started to grow. Seattle in winter doesn't forgive. The rain becomes colder, more insistent, and the days shrink until it feels like you're living in perpetual twilight. That year, it seemed to seep into our apartment too. I'd wake in the middle of the night sometimes to find her side of the bed empty. I'd hear the faint hum of her voice from the living room, speaking softly into her phone. By the time I joined her, she'd be pretending to scroll through design boards, as though nothing had happened. When I asked, she brushed it off. "Just talking to Mia," she said, her sister in Portland. "She's going through a rough patch." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the truth is, doubt doesn't need proof to take root. It thrives in silence, in half-answers, in the space between what's said and what's left unsaid. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I began watching her more closely. Not in an accusatory way, at least, that's how I justified it. But I noticed the details. The way she lingered in front of the mirror before going out. The new perfume she bought and wore sparingly, like it was meant for someone else's approval, not mine. One night, as I lay awake beside her, I found myself wondering when she'd last looked at me with that effortless smile I fell in love with. Not the practiced one she gave me now, but the real one, the one that lit her from within. I couldn't remember. And that terrified me more than anything. Part 2, the cracks beneath the surface. The thing about doubt is that once it takes hold, you start noticing everything. Things that once seemed harmless now carry a different weight. A late reply to a text. A smile at something unseen on her phone. A night out that doesn't quite add up. I told myself I wasn't suspicious by nature. I never wanted to be the kind of man who checks his wife's messages or follows her around like a detective in his own home. But it's astonishing how quickly love can turn into vigilance when the ground beneath you begins to shift. It was early February when Emily said she wanted to join a new co-working collective in Fremont. "They've got this amazing space," she told me over dinner, her fork pushing absently at the salmon on her plate. "Big windows, open tables, a creative atmosphere. I think I'd be more productive there than just sitting at home." "That sounds good," I said, keeping my tone even. "Which place?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled, too brightly. "It's called The Loft. You probably haven't heard of it." She was right, I hadn't. But something about the way she brushed off the question stayed with me. Usually, she'd pull out her phone to show me pictures, talk me through the details. This time, she moved quickly to another subject, as though the conversation itself was disposable. The following week, she started spending 3, sometimes 4 evenings a week there. She'd leave around 6 and come back near midnight, claiming the late hours helped her focus. Meanwhile, I found myself at the office longer, too, though not for work. I just didn't want to sit in the silence of our apartment, surrounded by her absence. One rainy Wednesday, I left work early and decided to surprise her. Maybe I could pick her up from this loft place, see her world outside our home. It wasn't mistrust that drove me, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. It was curiosity. A husband wanting to be part of his wife's life. The address she had given me was on a side street off Fremont Avenue. I parked my car nearby and walked. The rain had slowed to a mist, hanging in the glow of street lamps like silver dust. My breath fogged in the air as I approached the building. It was real. A tall, brick warehouse converted into studio space, windows glowing warmly from the inside. Through the glass, I saw people working at long tables, laptops open, cups of coffee beside them. Conversations hummed in the background. But Emily wasn't there. I lingered outside for nearly half an hour, scanning the crowd, waiting for her to appear. She didn't. When I finally walked back to my car, my chest felt heavy with something I didn't want to name. That night, she came home around midnight, smelling faintly of wine and the perfume she had started wearing lately, crisp, floral, expensive. "How was the loft?" I asked casually as she slipped off her coat. "Good. Productive," she said, her eyes flicking away from mine. "I got a lot done." I nodded, forcing a smile. But in my head, her words echoed like a hollow room. The more I tried to push my doubts aside, the stronger they grew. She guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. A password I didn't know appeared on her lock screen, something we'd never bothered with before. She laughed less with me, smiled more at messages she refused to share. I caught myself staring at her sometimes, trying to memorize the exact shape of her expression when she thought I wasn't looking. Was it guilt? Happiness? Something else entirely? It's a strange kind of loneliness, sharing a bed with someone whose thoughts feel 1,000 miles away. One evening, after she had gone out again, I wandered into her workspace. The desk by the window was cluttered with sketchpads, color swatches, and her laptop bag. I wasn't searching for anything, not really, but my eyes fell on one of the sketchbooks left open. The page was filled with quick pencil drawings. Abstract shapes, some designs for a logo maybe. But in the corner of the page, almost absent-mindedly, she had written a name. Mark. Just that. No context, no explanation. A name I knew well. Mark Jensen was my coworker. My friend. A man I had invited into our home more than once. My throat went dry as I stared at the page. It could mean nothing, I told myself. Designers write random words, brainstorm, sketch ideas. Maybe it was just coincidence. But the doubt, already festering, grew sharper. The following week, at the office, I couldn't stop myself from watching Mark more closely. He was the same as always, charming, confident, quick with a joke. But now, every time his phone buzzed and he smiled, I wondered who was on the other side of that message. When he asked casually, "How's Emily these days?" I felt something dark coil in my stomach. "She's fine," I said shortly, the words clipped. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. At home, I tried to act normal. Tried to keep our rituals alive, Tuesday takeout, Saturday market runs. But something between us had shifted into a quiet performance, both of us playing roles that no longer fit. One night, as we lay in bed, I finally broke. "Emily," I said softly, "are you happy?" She turned to look at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "Because. I don't know. Lately, you seem distant. Like your mind is somewhere else." She laughed gently, reaching to brush my cheek with her hand. "Danny, I've just been busy. You worry too much." Her touch was warm, her voice reassuring. But her eyes told a different story. And in that moment, I realized something I wasn't ready to face: love doesn't always vanish in a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it slips quietly into the shadows, leaving you grasping at memories that no longer belong to the present. Part 3, Shadows in Plain Sight. The next weeks passed in a fog. Seattle was at its grayest, the kind of damp, bone-deep cold that made everything feel heavier than it should. I buried myself in work, but no matter how many hours I spent at the office, my thoughts circled back to Emily, to the sketchbook with Mark's name in the corner. I told myself I wouldn't jump to conclusions. That word on a page could mean anything. But it was like a splinter beneath the skin, small, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. The first undeniable clue came on an ordinary Tuesday night. Emily had gone out again, claiming she wanted to get ahead on a client project. I stayed home, reheating leftover pasta and half watching a basketball game I didn't care about. Around 10, I heard her keys at the door. When she stepped inside, her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright, and a faint scent of whiskey clung to her. Not the perfume she usually wore, but the smoky trace of a drink. "How was the loft?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, just briefly, before answering. "Good. Productive." The same word she always used. Productive. It had begun to sound rehearsed, like a line from a script she didn't believe in anymore. As she set her bag down, her phone slipped from the side pocket. I bent to pick it up, my fingers brushing against the screen before she could snatch it back. For the briefest second, a message lit up. "Mark, had a great time tonight. Can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped. Emily's eyes widened as she grabbed the phone, locking it quickly. "Thanks," she said, her voice too casual. "Didn't want it to crack." I forced myself to nod, my throat too tight to speak. The image of that message burned into me like fire. I didn't confront her that night. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her slow, even breaths. My heart pounded, my thoughts spiraled. I wanted to shake her awake, demand the truth. But I didn't. Why? Maybe because some part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe because I was too afraid to hear her confirm what I already knew. Instead, I stared into the dark, feeling the weight of silence pressing down on me. The following days, everything Emily did seemed tinged with suspicion. When she laughed at her phone, I wondered if it was him. When she said she had a client call, I pictured her voice softening for Mark. At work, I could barely look at him. His jokes grated on me, his easy confidence felt like mockery. Every time his phone buzzed, I imagined Emily's name lighting up his screen. Once, I caught him stepping outside during lunch, speaking low into his phone, a smile tugging at his lips. My chest tightened, rage and humiliation colliding inside me. But I said nothing. The tension between Emily and me grew almost unbearable. Conversations became shorter, laughter rarer. She seemed to live in a different world, one I couldn't enter. One night, I finally asked, "Are you seeing someone else?" The words came out quieter than I expected, almost breaking. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What? You've been distant. Secretive. I just need to know." Her eyes narrowed, defensive. "Danny, no. God, no. I can't believe you'd even think that." I searched her face for truth, but all I saw was practiced indignation. "I'm just tired," she added, her tone softening. "Work has been overwhelming. You're imagining things." But the lies sat between us, thick and suffocating. That weekend, I did something I never thought I'd do. While Emily showered one morning, she left her phone charging on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I picked it up, entering the passcode I had memorized from glimpses over her shoulder. The screen unlocked. And there it was, a thread of messages with Mark. "Mark, last night was amazing. When can I see you again? Emily, soon. I'll tell him I'm working late again. Mark, I can't stop thinking about you. Emily, me neither. You make me feel alive." The room seemed to tilt around me. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I set the phone down just as the shower shut off. My hands shook so violently I had to clench them into fists to steady myself. When Emily stepped out, wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me like nothing had changed. And maybe for her, nothing had. For me, everything had. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. My rage was molten, but my fear of the fallout was stronger. What would I say? What would she say? Would she admit it, or twist the truth until I doubted myself again? Instead, I carried the knowledge like a stone in my chest, heavy and unyielding. Every glance, every word between us became poisoned. Her lies layered over my silence until our apartment felt like a cage, the air thick with unspoken truths. One night, I found myself standing by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked city. Lights blurred, reflections shimmered, people moved beneath umbrellas like shadows. And I thought, this is what it feels like to lose someone who's still standing right beside you. Part 4, When the Walls Collapse. The night I finally broke was nothing extraordinary. No storm outside, no dramatic backdrop. Just a quiet Tuesday, the kind where the city seemed to exhale in soft rain and distant car horns. Emily had gone out again, claiming another late work session. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at the muted TV, my chest buzzing with the words I had swallowed for too long. By the time I heard her keys in the lock, my decision was already made. She stepped in, hair damp from the mist, a faint trace of cologne clinging to her clothes. Not mine. Not anything I owned. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "You're up late." I stood, heart pounding. "Who is he, Emily?" Her smile faltered. "What? You heard me. Who is he?" For a moment, her face was blank, like she hadn't rehearsed this part. Then the defenses came rushing in. "Danny, you're being paranoid again," she said, setting her bag down with exaggerated calm. "We've talked about this." "No, we haven't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "We've danced around it, you've lied, and I've pretended not to notice. But I can't anymore." Her eyes flashed. "Lied? Really?" I took a step closer, my voice shaking. "I saw the messages, Emily." Her breath caught, the color draining from her face. For once, she didn't have a quick answer. "What messages?" she tried weakly, but her voice cracked on the last word. "The ones from Mark." His name felt like poison in my mouth. "The ones where you tell him I'm just an excuse. That he makes you feel alive." "Alive, Emily. Do you have any idea what it feels like to read that?" Silence. The ticking of the clock on the wall filled the space between us, louder with every passing second. Finally, she whispered, "Danny. I didn't mean for it to happen." The words sliced through me. Not a denial. Not a protest. An admission. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Didn't mean for it to happen. What, did you trip and fall into his bed?" "Don't," she said sharply, tears brimming in her eyes. "Don't make it cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think I'm the one being cruel? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back with a man I trusted, and I'm the cruel one." She flinched, her hands trembling as she wrapped her arms around herself. "I was lonely, Danny." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Lonely?" I whispered. "You had me. You had us. We built a life together, Emily. And you threw it away for, what? For him." Her tears spilled over, streaking her cheeks. "You stopped seeing me. Do you know what that feels like? To live with someone who's here in body but never really, here." I shook my head, stunned. "So that justifies it? That gives you the right to destroy everything we had?" "No," she said softly, brokenly. "Nothing justifies it. I didn't know how to stop." I turned away, my hands buried in my hair, trying to hold myself together. The apartment felt too small, the air too thick. Every corner of the room carried a memory of us, laughter, quiet mornings, whispered dreams. And now it all felt tainted, poisoned by betrayal. When I faced her again, she was sitting on the edge of the couch, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I love you, Danny," she whispered. "I still love you." The words should have meant something, but they only twisted the knife deeper. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to love me and betray me at the same time." Her eyes searched mine desperately, but I had nothing left to give her. For the first time since it all began, I felt something shift inside me, not doubt, not fear, but clarity. The foundation we had built was gone. The walls we lived within had collapsed. All that was left was the rubble. That night, I slept on the couch. Or rather, I lay there with my eyes closed, replaying every word, every tear, every hollow promise. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized, whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. Part 5, The Last Goodbye. The days after the confrontation blurred into one long stretch of silence. Emily tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, making coffee in the mornings, asking me about my day, folding laundry with trembling hands. But the words she had admitted, the tears she had shed, hung over us like a storm cloud that refused to break. I avoided her eyes. Avoided her touch. Even the sound of her footsteps felt foreign now, like they belonged to a stranger passing through my home. At night, we lay on opposite sides of the bed, the space between us an uncrossable canyon. Sometimes I could hear her crying softly into her pillow. Other times, I thought she was already gone, even if her body was still there. By the weekend, I knew I couldn't stay in limbo any longer. I came home Saturday evening with a decision made. The air smelled faintly of rain as I walked in, the city outside drenched in silver mist. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched cup of tea. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed, hopeful, afraid. "Danny," she began. I raised a hand, stopping her. My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. "I can't do this anymore." Her face crumpled. "Please. We can fix this. We can try." "No," I said firmly, though my chest ached with every word. "Trust doesn't come back. Not like this. You didn't just break a promise, Emily. You broke us." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I still love you. Doesn't that count for anything?" I shook my head slowly. Love isn't supposed to feel like this. Love isn't supposed to leave you hollow. The silence stretched between us, heavy and final. At last, she whispered, "So what happens now?" I took a deep breath. "I think you should go. Stay with your sister. I'll start packing my things later. We can figure out the details after." Her sobs filled the room as she buried her face in her hands. I wanted to go to her, to hold her like I used to. But I stayed where I was, because that man, the one who could hold her without doubt, no longer existed. When she finally left that night, suitcase in hand, I stood by the window and watched the taillights fade into the rain. The apartment was unbearably quiet, stripped of her presence, yet echoing with her absence. Every corner held a memory, her laughter, her touch, her smile. Now, those memories felt like ghosts, haunting walls that could no longer hold them. I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark, listening to the rain against the glass. For the first time in months, there were no lies, no secrets, no games. Just silence. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing in the ruins of something I had once believed unshakable. People always say betrayal feels like a knife to the heart. They're wrong. It feels like standing in a house you built with your own hands, watching the walls crumble, knowing no matter how much you loved it, you can't save it anymore. And as I sat there, staring at the empty room where we had once lived a life together, I realized something. The rain would keep falling. The city would keep moving. And somehow, so would I. But I would never be the same.